welcome to the Princesslandia podcast. This is episode 4 of the podcast. I'm your host, Prince Aladdin, or Prince Ali, or just Ali, or you know what? Maybe Ali Ababwa, if you want, for the podcast. With me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. Flynn Ryder. Flynn, how excited are you for this week's episode? Oh, well, I'm very excited, Ali. We have an amazing episode ready for today. The topic is amazing. We have some phenomenal guests with us in studio today, and I'm very excited to get right into it. So am I. So am I, my friend. I think we should just dive right into it. I'm going to give a shout out to Ron, but we're not even going to cut to him. Ron's our technical coordinator. He's with us today. But we're not even going to go to him right now because that's how much stuff we have to get to today. I think we should just get right to the topic, don't you? Yeah, I really do. Although I do have a question. Is that your coffee mug for this week? Is that what's going on there? Oh, you noticed my coffee mug. Yeah, this is my coffee mug. I thought I'd try out something a little new this week. So yeah, this is my coffee mug. Why is it a problem? Well, it's a little silly. I don't know. Oh, it's silly. Oh, okay. Well, it hasn't been silly when you had the bigger coffee mug, so I don't know why it's silly this week. You know what? We're just going to get right to our topic this week, though. Our topic this week is a big one. It's the 10 best rock bands of all time. Impossible topic, but one we're going to tackle. One we're going to tackle today. So, Flynn, how excited are you about today's topic? I mean, seriously, I think we should at least put the coffee mugs, like, underneath the table because I think they're taking up too much space, especially yours. It's a little ridiculous. All right, fine. We'll put the coffee mugs under the table. How excited are you for the topic? Well, I'm very excited for the topic. I'm just a little distracted by your coffee mug right now. I don't know what to say. Well, let's just get right to the topic. The 10 best rock bands of all time. Let's get right into it. And all right, well, let's go ahead and start with some of the tougher omissions that we had to make this week. Obviously, very difficult list to put together. So many great bands in the history of rock and roll. We had to narrow it down to a top 10, so we had to leave out a lot of great bands. It was very difficult, but Flynn, I'll kick it over to you. What were some of the tougher bands that you had to leave off your 10 best list? Go ahead. Well, yeah, like you said, just a really, really difficult list to make. You're talking about so many great different bands that have walked the earth here. I'll start with one of my tougher omissions. It was Creedence Clearwater Revival. Big fan of CCR. Love their music. Some great albums. John Fogerty's just an absolute legend. Great songwriter. Great voice. Great musician. End of the day, they didn't make my 10 best list. It was a difficult choice. I really do enjoy them, but they didn't quite make my 10 best list. So that's the one I'll start with here. All right. Good start. I also love CCR. I'll talk about the Doors. Here, I love the Doors. You know, I grew up listening to the Doors and Jim Morrison. Some great albums, great songs, classic songs that will live on forever. Didn't quite make my 10 best list. You know, the older you get, some of their lyrics, aren't quite as mature or sophisticated as some of the other bands on the list, but I still love the Doors. I'll always love the Doors, and that was a tough omission for me, but they did not make my 10 best list. Yeah, I also grew up listening to the Doors, so I understand what you're saying. I'll go with one, Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses didn't make either of our list. One of the more fun bands to listen to. I still listen to Guns N' Roses all the time. Appetite for Destruction, one of the great debut albums of all time, maybe the greatest debut album of all time. I'm just from top to bottom, just a phenomenal album. Then they had the Use Your Illusion albums 1 and 2, which were really good. I think that they would have just come out with one album at that time and picked the best songs off each album. It would be one of the better rock albums of all time, but they overextended themselves a little bit. Some of the songs aren't as great. But a great band, great live band, fun to see. I listen to them all the time, but they didn't quite make the 10 best list for me. All right, well, along those lines, I'll go with AC/DC. You talk about longevity. AC/DC, terrific band, a lot of fun to listen to, just like Guns N' Roses. They lost their lead singer, Bon Scott, after a few albums and replaced him with Brian Johnson, I believe his name is, right? and just didn't hesitate. You know, didn't miss a beat. Just kept on throwing out hits, great albums. Another great live band. A lot of fun to listen to. Didn't quite make the ten best list for me though. Yep. All right. Well, I'll go with Metallica. We both love Metallica. They're a great band, one of the great heavy metal bands of all time, and a little bit more sophisticated than just your heavy metal band. You know, they can mix it up. They had a lot of diversity. They went a lot of. They weren't ballads so much, but they were slower, more thoughtful songs that they had a lot, and they produced some great albums. The drummer's annoying as hell, but other than that, I love everything about Metallica. And they didn't make our 10 best list, and that was a tough omission. All right, all right. Well, I think the last band we'll talk about is Soundgarden. Uh, I'm a huge Soundgarden fan. Chris Cornell, obviously one of the great musicians of all time, one of the great rock voices of all time. And didn't quite make our list. Their first couple albums, they were kind of feeling themselves out still, trying to find their way, and they weren't great. They were just okay. And then they produced three of the better rock albums of all time. Bad Motorfingers, a classic. Some great songs on there. Super Unknown is maybe one of the greatest rock albums of all time, from top to bottom. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal album. And then Down on the Upside, after Super Unknown. Another great, great album. Not as good as Super Unknown, but really, really good. A lot of great songs on there. Great listen. Then they kind of phased out after that, fizzled out. Chris Cornell joined another band, did some solo work, got back together later, but they kind of stopped making music together for the most part. But man, what a 3 album run that was. But I love that band, but they did not quite make either one of our 10 best list, and that was a difficult choice. But you get down to the top 10, and there's a lot of tough choices to make. So I think Flynn, I think that'll do it for the emotions list. Yeah, obviously we could talk about 30, 40 more bands that are great and didn't make our list, but we can't talk about all of them. So I think we'll go ahead and get right to our 10 best list. Let's go ahead and let's get right to them. Actually, before we get to the list real quick, we should talk about a couple of the artists that we deemed ineligible for the list. We had to decide whether we considered them more solo artists or members of a band. There were some tough decisions we had to make. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band were obviously at the top of the list. It just always felt like Bruce was a little bit more of a solo artist, like the band was just with him, and nothing against the E Street Band, they're great musicians, but it always felt like it was Bruce Springsteen, and then the afterthought was the band. And another one was Prince, Prince and the Revolution, obviously terrific band. But we deemed that Prince was more of a solo artist. Jimi Hendrix was another one. A lot of artists like that we had to decide if we considered them bands or solo artists, and there were some tough decisions there. And I have to point it out because obviously they would be on our list, probably. They'd be on my list, I know that. So we did have to make some tough decisions on that. I just wanted to point that out real quick before we got to our list. So now we can move forward. Yeah, great point, Flynn. We did have to make some really difficult decisions on stuff like that, like if we considered them part of a band or individual artist, and we made the best call we could. A lot of people might disagree with the decisions we made, but those were the choices that we made. So now, Flynn, if you're ready, I think we'll get to our 10 best rock bands of all time. Let's show our list. I'll start with number 10 here. At number 10, I have Nirvana, the iconic band out of Seattle with the great Kurt Cobain. Obviously, they did not have the longevity that we would have hoped they would have had, but man, in their short time together, you can't deny the greatness that they had. I think they only had 4 studio albums, but one of them was Nevermind, inarguably one of the greatest albums ever created. I think Kurt Cobain once said that he could have spread out the tracks on Nevermind into like a 20-year career if he'd have released just a couple songs on different albums over the years, and he's 100% right. Because that album is phenomenal, from track 1 to track 13. Just one of the great albums ever made. In Utero was fantastic. Then they had the Unplugged performance, which is just brilliant. Turned it into an album, and that's one of the great albums of all time. Amazing performance by them. And I have Nirvana at my number 10. All right, well, at my number 10, I have Pearl Jam, also from Seattle, about the same time. But Pearl Jam, in my opinion, one of the greatest bands of all time. Great albums. One of the great debut albums of all time in 10. And they had Versus, Vitology, Lightning Bolt's phenomenal. The self-titled album is amazing. And then one of the great live bands of all time. Really are unbelievable shows. Terrific live, great set list, great everything. But the songs, I mean, Alive, Better Man, Black, Lightning Bolt, Sirens, Breathe, Just Breathe. I mean, just throughout the years, one of the great bands of all time, and I have Pearl Jam at my number 10. You know, Kurt Cobain hated that band. Kurt Cobain hated Pearl Jam as a band. Yeah, well, this is not Kurt Cobain's list of best bands of all time. This is my list. So why don't we just move on to number 9? You want to move on to number 9? Okay, all right. No reason to get snippy. All right, let's go to number 9. At number 9, I have REM. REM from the 80s, 90s, and beyond, I believe. One of the great bands of all time. They started out a college radio band. You know, they started out pretty small. Kind of an indie rock band before I think indie rock even was a thing. And then they grew into one of the greatest bands of all time. Those early albums, though, Reckoning, Murmur, Life's Rich Pageant, just terrific albums. And then when they got huge, it was Out of Time and Automatic for the People. And then that one album, New Adventures in Hi-Fi, very underrated album. Just phenomenal songs on that album. They did it for a very, very long time, and they did it at a very high level for a very long time. So I have REM as my number 9. Flynn, who you got at 9? Well, at my number 9, I have the Beach Boys. That's right, the Beach Boys. I think the Beach Boys get dismissed a little bit here and there by people. They're kind of considered a California surfer band type deal. You know, they went on for a very long time. They had John Stamos drumming for them at one point, so they were a little hard to take seriously. But when they were in their prime, man, they were one of the best bands of all time. And responsible for one of the greatest albums of all time, Pet Sounds. A landmark album, a game changer in the music industry. You know, I think the Beatles' response to Pet Sounds was Sgt. Pepper's. So, I mean, they changed music. But then they had Beach Boys Today and Surf's Up. Just a lot of great albums, so many great hits. You know, people don't think of the Beach Boys as that kind of elite band, but man, if you go through their hits, their songs, I mean, Good Vibrations, Surf's Up, Wouldn't It Be Nice, God Only Knows, one of the great songs of all time. Sloop John B, very underrated song, such a fun song to listen to. I mean, you know their music, you love their music. You might not consider them one of the greatest bands of all time, but I certainly do. I certainly do. I have them at my number 9. All right, Flynn coming in with the Beach Boys at number 9. Wow, California kid over here. All right, well, let's get to number 8. At my number 8, I have The Clash. And The Clash, they're nothing like the Beach Boys, but I also feel like they get lost in the shuffle sometimes. I think people forget their greatness. So many great albums. London Calling, Combat Rock, the self-titled album, Sandinista, and then the catalog of songs, Train in Vain, Rock the Casbah, London Burning, London Calling, Bank Robber, I Fought the Law, and then such a great live band, such energy, you know. And they changed the music scene. They really did. Punk rock was a big thing at the time, but I think the Clash took it to a whole nother level, and I think people kind of undervalue the Clash a little bit. God, great musicians, great songs, great albums, and I love the Clash. I have the Clash as my number 8. So yeah, that's that. All right. Well, the Clash at number 8. That's an interesting pick. I also love the Clash. Also, some of the great live albums ever made. So not a bad pick there. At my number 8, though, I have U2, the boys from Dublin, Bono, The Edge, Adam, Larry. God, they've been doing it for like 40 years now, haven't they? They started out so strong, a couple great albums, and then the Joshua Tree and Rat on Hum took them to the status of like the biggest band in the world, basically. And then they reinvented themselves with Achtung Baby, one of the greatest albums ever made. Zooropa was right in there. All That You Can't Leave Behind, very undervalued album, terrific album. But the songs, the set list that they can throw out there. Sunday Bloody Sunday, Mysterious Ways. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. With or Without You, Bullet the Blue Sky, One, So Cruel, Pride. The list goes on and on. So many great songs. Such a great band. They've been doing it for such a long time. It's kind of those things, you either die the hero or you stick around long enough to be the villain, and that's kind of where YouTube's at right now, because there's a lot of YouTube backlash these days, and I don't think people appreciate what a great band they've always been and what they are, and I have U2 as my number 8. U2 clocking in at number 8 for Flynn. All right, well, let's get to our number 7. At my number 7, I have The Who. Who, you say? That's right, The Who. The Who, one of the greatest bands of all time. They've been doing it since the 60s. They're still doing it today. So many great albums. Who's Next? Tommy, Quadrophenia, The Who Sell Out. And then maybe the greatest live album ever created, and Live at Leeds. And along those lines, one of the great live bands you'll ever see. Just killer. Just a killer show live. Pete Townsend, one of the great songwriters and musicians who ever lived. Roger Daltrey, the perfect complement to that, with one of the great rock voices of all time. Just so many great albums and so many great songs. Baba O'Reilly, Who Are You, The Seeker, Happy Jack, Substitute, Magic Bus, Behind Blue Eyes. Just a beautiful, beautiful song. Won't Get Fooled Again, The Kids Are Right. The list goes on and on. They've been doing it forever, and they've been doing it at such an elite level for such a long time. And I have The Who at my number 7. Flynn, who you got at your number 7? Well, I have The Animals at number 7. A lot of people are probably saying who are the Animals? But trust me, you know the Animals. Animals came in that wave of the British invasion. They get a little lost in the greatness of those other bands, but man, the Animals, just one of the great bands of all time. Great albums, self-titled, Animal Tracks, Animalisms. Their greatest hits albums are just a collection of bangers, one after the other. The songs, We Gotta Get Out of This Place, It's My Life, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, The Story Bo Diddley, the Sam Cooke cover and Bring It On Home to Me, I'm Crying, and then possibly one of the greatest songs ever recorded in House of the Rising Sun. You had Eric Burdon, one of the great rock and roll voices of all time, that deep, haunting voice that just gets you. I think it was Bono who once described the Animals. He said, the Beatles always wanted to hold your hand. It always felt like the Animals wanted to go a little bit further. And that was just the aura of the Animals. They just had that greatness about them. They had intensity. They had the fire. They had the voice. And I have the Animals as my number 7. I love the Animals. All right, the Animals coming in out of nowhere at Flynn's number 7. Good stuff, Flynn. Good stuff. All right, let's get to number 6. At my number 6, I have Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. One of the great bands of all time. I consider them probably the greatest American band of all time. And I know some people will be like, what's the difference between Tom Petty and Heartbreakers and Bruce Springsteen and the Street Band? Well, Tom Petty and Heartbreakers always felt like more of a band. Like they were always together. Overnight, they were Mudcrutch when they were coming up, and then Tom Petty renamed the band Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers overnight, and they all just dealt with it. Tom Petty, he was the man. He was the lead singer. He wrote the lyrics. He had a little ego on him, which you want in your lead singers, but man, they just felt like a band. Even when Tom went off and did his solo albums, he always had the band working on it with him, and then they toured with him for the albums too. So they always felt like more of a band, and what a band it was. They came right out of the gates with albums like Damn the Torpedoes and Hard Promises and Southern Accents. And then they just kept it going with Wildflowers, one of the great albums they ever made, one of the great albums ever made. Echo, underrated album. Full Moon Fever, technically Tom Petty solo, but like I said, the whole band worked on it. And yeah, and then I know we've been harping on this, but one of the great live bands to ever exist. If you were lucky enough to see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers live, man, did you see a show? Just they were just so much better live than they were even on albums, which is saying a lot because their albums were phenomenal. But man, that's just a testament to how great they were live. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal live band. Phenomenal band altogether. And I have Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers at number 6. All right. Well, I agree with everything you just said. 100%. Every word. I also have Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as my number 6. I agree with you. I consider them the greatest American band of all time. Their longevity, their discography, the hits. I mean, hit after hit after hit. You can go down the line with all of them. Refugee, Don't Come Around Here No More, Breakdown, I Won't Back Down, American Girl, Mary Jane's Last Dance, Here Comes My Girl, Running Down a Dream, Echo, a haunting, beautiful song off that, like you said, underrated album. They did it for so long. Tom Petty was such a genius. His lyrics, his Zombie Zoo was one of my favorite songs. Just a crazy out of nowhere song. God, it's fun to listen to. Just a phenomenal band, and like you said, one of the greatest bands you'll ever see live. And they did it for a very long time. They did it at the highest level for a very long time. I love Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I think their volume of work puts them above so many bands. It's just it's amazing the music that they put out. Unfortunately, we lost Tom a couple years ago, but yeah, I agree with you. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers I have as my number 6. I think they're one of the greatest bands who ever lived. All right, well, we agree with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers at number 6. We're down to our top 5, Flynn. We're down to our top 5. We're down to our top 5 greatest rock bands of all time, and let's get right to it. At my number 5, I have Queen. Queen. What do you say about Queen? Some of the greatest musicians of all time, and arguably one of the great voices in the history of music, especially rock music. Freddie Mercury, just a phenomenal lead singer for the band. You got the albums, Queen 1, Queen 2, Night at the Opera. You got the songs, Bohemian Rhapsody, one of the most uniquely beautiful songs and terrific songs ever written. And then We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions, Somebody to Love, Under Pressure with David Bowie, Killer Queen, Fat Bottom Girls, just one of the great bands of all time. And then, like we've talked about, one of the great live bands of all time. They had maybe the greatest live performance in the history of rock and roll at Live Aid, in front of, I don't know, 1 million people. I mean, geez, just incredible crowd, but one of the great live performances ever. One of the great lead singers of all time. One of the greatest mustaches of all time in Freddie Mercury. And I love Queen, and I have Queen as my number 5. I love Queen. Who you got at your number 5? Well, my number 5, I have Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd came out in the 60s, I believe. They went on for a long time before, they started hating each other. But man, what a run it was. What a run it was. I mean, you got some of the great albums ever made. You got The Wall. You got Wish You Were Here. You got Dark Side of the Moon. You got Metal. I mean, unbelievable stuff. The songs, though, Wish You Were Here, The Wall, Comfortably Numb, one of the greatest songs ever written, one of the great live performances of all time, just a phenomenal song. Money, just man, what a band. They made you think, they made you love music, they just made you feel everything you could possibly feel when you're listening to music, which is the point of music, right? Pink Floyd, I love Pink Floyd. I have them at my number 5. One of my favorite bands of all time, some of the greatest albums of all time. Dark Side of the Moon charted for has charted on Billboard's list for about like 1,000 weeks, almost 1,000 weeks or so. I mean, just a testament to their greatness and everything they've done. And I have Pink Floyd as my number 5. I think they're one of the great bands in rock and roll history, obviously. All right, great stuff from Flynn at number 5 there with Pink Floyd. Well done, my friend. All right, let's get to our number 4s. At my number 4, I have the Rolling Stones, one of the most iconic bands of all time. They've been doing it forever at this point. They're still doing it. They're still out there performing and doing great stuff. But man, you talk about the albums, Some Girls, Exile on Main Street, Voodoo Lounge, Sticky Fingers, just so many great albums from these guys. So many songs. Sympathy for the Devil, Gimme Shelter, Ruby Tuesday, You Can't Always Get What You Want. Just one of the greatest bands of all time. No arguing it. Mick Jagger, one of the most iconic lead singers of all time. One of the greatest lead singers of all time. Then you got Keith Richards, one of the great guitarists of all time. Just amazing band, amazing musicians, amazing live band. They've been doing it, like I said, just forever. You can't deny the Rolling Stones and how great they are. I have them at number 4. Okay, I think that's a little low in my personal opinion. But at my number 4, I have the Kinks. Another very underrated band. In my opinion, the Kinks and the Animals are the two most underrated bands in rock history. They both came out kind of during the British invasion in the 60s. They both got lost in the shuffle, but you can't deny how great they are, and the Kinks are no exception. The Kinks are one of the greatest bands, and the Kinks did it for over 20 years. They started out in the 60s. They were still killing it in the 80s. Just one of the great bands of all time. Some great albums. Something Else, Face to Face, The Village Green, Preservation Society, Lola versus the Power Man, Kinda Kinks. They just did it for such a long time, and they're hits. I mean, Lola is iconic. You Really Got Me, one of the great songs of all time. All Day and All of the Night, Strangers, Well Respected Man. One of my favorite songs is I'm Not Like Anybody Else. Just, man, powerful song. And they've done it all. You know, they did rock, they did heavy hitting rock. They did, and then they did dance numbers into the, Come Dancing with the Kinks. Not dance pop, not pop music, but, rhythmic, different kind of songs. They've had such a breadth of hits, and they've been all over the place. I think the Kinks are, I have them at number 4. I obviously think they're one of the greatest bands of all time. I think they're way overlooked, and I think the Kinks are it. I think the Kinks are one of the great bands of all time. I have them at number 4. The Kinks. Good pull from you at number 4 with the Kinks. Great band. All right, let's get to our top 3. At my number 3, I have Led Zeppelin. I mean, come on. It's Led Zeppelin. Well, obviously, one of the greatest bands who ever lived. The albums speak for themselves. I think they were self-titled, or basically Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 3, 4. Then they had Physical Graffiti, the hits, Kashmir, Immigrant Song, Black Dog, Ramble On, one of my favorite songs, Dancing Days, Thank You, probably the most beautiful love song ever written, Thank You, Whole Lot of Love, No Quarter, and then of course, one of the most iconic songs ever, written and recorded in Stairway to Heaven. Led Zeppelin is that band for me. Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, some of the great musicians who ever lived. One of the great rock voices of all time. Led Zeppelin is one of my bands. I love their catalog. I love their music. Led Zeppelin is my number 3, and I don't apologize for it, and I don't think I have to. Led Zeppelin at my number 3. Led Zeppelin, yeah. Well, I hate to spoil the ending here, but I love Led Zeppelin, but they did not make my top 10 list as much as I love them. They don't quite hit me like the other bands on my list do, but man, it's a great band. That was a very tough leave out for me. At my number 3, I have The Who. Excuse me, The Who. I think you had them a little lower, maybe at number 7. But you talk about one of the most iconic rock bands of all time. The albums, you talked about them. The hits, some of the greatest rock songs ever written. Pete Townsend, one of the great musicians and songwriters of all time. Daltrey had the voice. Keith Moon's one of the great drummers of all time. And then Pete Entwistle was in there with them. God, what a great band. And then 2 of their albums were like rock operas, with Tommy and Quadrophenia. Can you imagine the genius it takes to write those albums and create those albums? I mean, if you just listen to them on their own, they're great albums. But then you put it all together with the stories and the thread. Quadrophenia and Tommy, just phenomenal. I don't think we fully understand the genius of Pete Townsend and what he did. One of the great songwriters of all time, one of the great musicians of all time, and The Who's one of the great bands of all time. Behind Blue Eyes is one of the most beautiful songs ever written. I love that song. I love The Who. I love their catalog. I love their albums. And then, like you said, Live at Leeds has got to be probably the greatest live album ever created. It was a great live band. They blew the roof off. And I have The Who at number 3. And I feel good about that. Well, you should feel good about that. The Who, obviously, one of the greatest bands of all time. You kind of talked me into thinking they should have been higher on my list. But we're on to our top 2. We're on to our top 2 rock bands of all time. And at my number 2, I have U2 at number 2. Like you said, the boys from Dublin. One of the great rock careers of all time. You mentioned it. They started out so strong with War and Boy, and then Joshua Tree took them to another level, Rattle and Hum. And then they reinvented themselves, like you said, with Octoon Baby. And The Edge, one of the great guitarists of all time. Bono, one of the great lead singers who ever lived, obviously. One of the great live bands of all time. And they just kept it going. Their last couple albums weren't universally loved, but God, there were some great songs on there too, even. But I have U2 as my number 2. I don't think there's any denying how great U2 is. They've done it for a very long time. They've done it at the highest level. U2, great musicians. Bono, like I said, one of the great lead singers in the history of music. And just the catalog they have is phenomenal. Just phenomenal. You could listen to a U2 concert. You could hear 25 songs, and there's 25 more songs you want to hear. That's how great they are. And I have U2 as my number 2. All right. Well, my number 2, I have the Beatles. The boys from Liverpool. Not from Dublin. They're from Liverpool. You can't deny the Beatles' greatness. I don't know who would want to. They had about a 10-year run is all, which is short as far as, a lot of the other bands went a lot longer. Beatles had around for 10 years, but man, you look at those 10 years. They released 3 albums a year at times. It's like all they did was make music. But the hits, the albums, Sgt. Pepper's and Revolver, probably 2 of the greatest albums ever made. Then you got Let It Be and Abbey Road, and Rubber Soul. The greatness of the individual musicians, and then you put them together in the band. The Beatles are clearly one of the greatest bands of all time. They changed music forever. Bands today are still inspired by the Beatles, and they always have been, and they always will be. They're one of those bands that changed music forever, changed rock and roll forever. The Beatles are at my number two. Uh, it was hard to not to put them at number one, honestly, but obviously one of the great bands of all time, one of the most iconic bands of all time, some of the greatest musicians of all time. I have the Beatles at number two. You've got the Beatles at number two. Well, I disagree with you because we're down to our number one, and I have the Beatles at number one. I'm just going to get right to it. Everything you said was accurate. They were only around for about 10 years as a band, but I mean, you're kidding me, right? With the amount of music they put out, and you're right. It's just about all they did was make music and make great music. Those albums, like you said, Let It Be, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, Abbey Road, all four of them might be in for the top band. Rubber Soul. I mean, Yellow Submarine. The band just constantly put out great albums, great hits. They have three of the greatest musicians in the history of music in John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. And Ringo was just a blast. Ringo was fun. But you're talking, with those first three, you're talking three of the greatest musicians of all time. And they all went on with their individual stuff and continued to make great music and great songwriters. But the Lennon-McCartney songwriting duo can never be matched, in my opinion. Just two of the greatest songwriters and musicians of all time. They complemented each other so well. But just look at the hits. Look at the songs. I mean, Hey Jude, Yesterday, A Day in the Life, As My Guitar Gently Weeps, Love Me Do, Something, Let It Be, I've Just Seen a Face, Strawberry Fields Forever, Revolution, Penny Lane, and so many more. I mean, on and on and on. There's no touching the Beatles, in my opinion. I think it's as many great bands as there are, and as many great bands as I love. I think the Beatles are actually a very easy number one pick, and that's why I have them at number one. Yeah, well, I mean, everything you said is correct. I also love the Beatles. At my number one, it's probably not a secret anymore, I have the Rolling Stones as my number one. I think they are the greatest rock band of all time. Some of it has to do with how long they've done it. Like you said, the Beatles had a 10-year run, and there's no denying how great they were, but the Stones have been around forever, literally forever, and they've done it all. They've had so many great albums. You talked about the albums before: Exile on Main Street, Sticky Fingers, Goat's Head Soup, Some Girls, Voodoo Lounge. But all you got to do is download their greatest hits albums, though, and you understand how great they are. I mean, just hit after hit after hit. I mean, come on. Sympathy for the Devil, Satisfaction, Wild Horses, Angie, Ruby Tuesday, Can't Always Get What You Want. And then what I consider to probably be the greatest rock song ever recorded and made, Gimme Shelter. I think Gimme Shelter is maybe the greatest song of all time. But they've just done it for so long. Mick Jagger, the ageless Mick Jagger, just keeps rocking every single day. They've been around for so long, and they've been around longer than the Beatles, and I think they've done it every bit as good as the Beatles. I really do. I think the Stones match up song for song with the Beatles, and they've been around a lot longer, and they have a bigger catalog, and so that's why I have the Rolling Stones as my number one rock band of all time. All right. Well, the age-old question of Stones versus the Beatles. I mean, there's no wrong answer. Well, except for yours. Yours is the wrong answer. Mine's the right answer. It's the Beatles. But those are Flynn and I's list for the top, the 10 best rock bands of all time. I hope you enjoyed the list. You probably disagree with them because everyone has different opinions on the best rock bands of all time. But those are our list. We were happy to share them with you. And now we're gonna try something a little different. We do have a panel of experts this week, and we're gonna kick it over to them. But Flynn and I are just gonna take a back seat for this. We're gonna turn it over to the Sinatra Group. Music icon Frank Sinatra has graced us with his presence today, and he's going to lead a panel discussion with some other music icons who are also here with us. They're going to lead a discussion about the best rock bands of all time and see what they think about it, and we're just going to turn it right over to them. Frank, let's just take it nice and easy and go ahead and do your thing, Frank. Thanks for being with us here, and go ahead and take over the panel. All right, Ali and Flynn, thanks for having me with you today. It's a real honor for you guys to have me here, by the way. I'm Frank Sinatra, and I'm going to lead the Sinatra group in a panel discussion about the best rock bands of all time. I'd like to introduce the members of the panel I have with you today. First off, we've got Harry Styles. Harry Styles of One Direction fame is with us today. Second off, we've got Elvis Presley. Rock icon Elvis Presley also joins us on the panel. And lastly, we've got Jesus of Nazareth. Not sure why he's here exactly, but Jesus is our fourth member of the panel. Thank you for being here, everybody. All right, issue number 1, best rock bands of all time. What are your initial thoughts? No Direction, let's start with you. Well, I like rock and roll. I'm obviously a big music fan. I really enjoy rock and roll. I'm a little disappointed there weren't a lot of pop bands on there. I think pop is rock. Personally, I think pop is rock. I think they're in the same category. So I was a little disappointed in that. Yap. Elvis, what do you think? What are your initial thoughts on the best rock bands of all time? But I love rock and roll, baby. I love rock and roll. I didn't invent rock and roll, but a lot of people would say that I perfected rock and roll, and it's hard to argue with those people. So, I love the genre, and I'm excited to talk about some of my favorite bands we have today. Can't understand a word, baby. Jesus, what are you even doing here, Jesus? Well, I'm a big fan of music. I'm kind of an expert on all things. I've been around for a very, very long time, and I like rock music. So I'm thinking I'll be a great panel member, and I'm excited to talk about this topic. Get a haircut. All right, next issue. What's with the wardrobe with rock and roll? So many crazy outfits. For a long time, it was leather and makeup and big hair. Then it was flannel shirts. Now you got guys wearing dresses. What happened to wear a nice suit, for Pete's sake? What is this crap? Harry No Style, what do you think? Well, I don't think wardrobe matters at all in music. It's all about the quality of the music you put out. It's all about the rhythm and the sound and the lyrics and the way you make people feel. That's what's important about music. And also if you're a guy and you want to wear a dress, then wear a dress. Like who really cares? I mean, just go ahead and wear a dress. Boo hoo, you had me and then you lost me. Elvis, what do you think about the wardrobe in rock and roll music? Well, I'm all for different styles in rock and roll, man. I like it when bands wear different outfits. I was one of the groundbreakers in rock and roll style. I made it cool. I made wearing a lot of different things cool. So I like it when bands take chances and wear different things, and I'm all for it. I like it when all these bands try out different outfits. That's what I think. Once more around, pal. It's all pops and buzzes from here. But I was saying I like it when bands take chances, man, and wear all kinds of different things. I'm all for it. I really am. Shut up. Jesus, what do you think about all this crap that rock and roll bands wear these days? Well, I never really cared, what people wore when they played music. I don't care about their wardrobes or their outfits. I really didn't. Or their big hair. I just admire the music. I just appreciate the music. I was never really musically gifted. So I just really admire the guys who can go out there and make great music and sing great songs and write great lyrics. That's all I really cared about. I never focused on what they wore. And like I said, I didn't have it in me to be like a big rock star. I just didn't. That's where you're wrong, baby. You could have been big. You had the ear of the people. You just never learned how to play guitar or piano or anything like that. But you could have been a big music star. You really could have. I just don't get you, baby. You got a Chris Cornell quality about you. You could have been a big star. You really could have, but you never gave it a chance, really. You never did. You had the talent, kid. You had the talent. No, I never really had any musical talent. I played the tambourine a little bit when I was younger, but I mean, nobody respects the tambourine, and I just never had it in me to be a big star. I asked these guys. I didn't have any musical talent. No, he didn't have any musical talent at all. Yeah, he was not musically gifted, man. He basically had no musical talent. That's where you're wrong, people. This kid, Jesus, he had potential. He really did. He had a Dave Grohl, Kurt Cobain thing going about him. He could have been a big music star. He never gave the people what they wanted. They wanted him to play the big rooms, and play the hits, And when he multiplied the fish and the bread in front of that big crowd, that's what they were looking for. That's what they wanted from you. You know, they wanted the hits. They wanted you to play the big rooms. That's what they wanted from you. You never gave the people what they wanted. Well, I mean, you know, I mean, I did die on the cross for everyone. I think that's something. That's not what people were looking for, baby. They wanted the big hits. They wanted the songs you could sing along to. They wanted you to play the big rooms. That's what they were looking for, baby. Come on. Issue number 3. What's the best part about being a rock star or a musical icon? What are the benefits that come with it? What do you love about it most? Harry and the Hendersons. Let's start with you. What do you think? What's the best part about being a music icon? Well, for me personally, it's just about connecting with people, you know, and maybe making their lives a little bit better by hearing my music and my words and really connecting them and letting them know that they're not alone out there. Really, that's the benefit that I see out of being a music icon. Check his papers. Elvis, what do you think the best part about being a rock icon is? Well, there's a lot of benefits that come with being a rock icon, man. But I gotta be honest with you, Frank. I think it's the women that you get to meet. You know, I think the women that you get to meet. I think that's the best part about being a rock icon. I really do. I really do. I hear you, baby, loud and clear, loud and clear. All right, Jesus, what do you think the best part about being a rock star is? Well, you know, I gotta go with Harry. I think when you have a mass audience like that, and you can just make them better in their daily lives, or let them know that they're not alone out there. That we're all going through the same emotions, the same feelings, the same pain, the same hurt, and you know, you could be the biggest rock star in the world, but your heart can still be broken, and I think that's the connection that rock stars and musicians have with their audience, and for me personally, that I believe it. I really do believe it. I think that's the biggest part about being not only a music icon or a rock star, but a leader of people or a historic figure. I think that's the best part about it, really. Nobody's buying that, Jesus. We all know you used to hang with Mary Magdalene. You used to swing, baby. All right, let's get to issue number 4. The best rock band in the world. For most people, it comes down to the Beatles or the Stones. So which are you? You a Beatles fan or a Stones fan? Which do you prefer? I disqualify myself because I'm better than both of them. Zero Direction, let's start with you. What do you think? Are you a Beatles guy or are you a Stones guy? Well, if you made me choose, I'd have to go with the Beatles. They've always been a big inspiration for me personally. I prefer the Beatles. They're more of a pop band than a rock band, which I like, as I've said. And you know, I'm a big Beatles fan. And if I have to decide between the two, I'm gonna go with the Beatles. You know, every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I'll be honest with you though. I think One Direction could have made both lists. I think they're one of the most popular, most influential bands of all time, and I was a little disappointed that One Direction wasn't on either list. Check his papers. One Direction is not going to make any list of the 10 best rock bands of all time. Come on, what, you been drinking a little too much wine there, Harry? That's a curse of you people. All right, Elvis, what do you think? Well, I'm not going to lie, Frank. I kind of forgot the question. I'll tell you the question, baby. What's with all this sneering stuff at the crowd and the audience? People want to like you, baby. Contempt for the audience. That's what's going to bring you down. And don't think the man upstairs isn't keeping score, baby. He put you up in the penthouse. He can kick you down to the gutter. That's for sure. All right, Jesus. Let's get to the Stones or the Beatles. If you had to pick one, who do you like? Who do you like? Who do you prefer? Well, if I had to pick one, I love both bands. I'll say that. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the Rolling Stones. You know, I love their music. I love their catalog. Plus, they had a humility about them. They really did. They were humble guys. You know, they never thought they were bigger than Jesus. They just didn't. And I always respected that about them. They were big rock stars, but they stayed grounded. They really did. And the Beatles, not so much. So if at the end of the day, if I had to pick, I would go with the Rolling Stones. I think they're the best rock band of all time. All right, well, I think that's all we have from the Sinatra Group on the topic of the best rock bands of all time. I hope we helped move the conversation forward a little bit, although a lot of the opinions were pretty useless, especially that Harry Styles guy. He had no valuable opinions. And then that Elvis guy, he should probably cut his sideburns a little bit, in my opinion. You watch your mouth, old man. Hey, Easy, baby, easy. I got chunks of guys like you in my stool. Jesus, go kick Elvis's butt for me real quick. Frank, I'm a pacifist. I don't know if you know that about me or not. That's the curse of you people. All right, well, I think we're done with the Sinatra group. Flynn and Ali, let's kick it back to you. Thanks for having us on. It's an honor for you to have us here. Back to Flynn and Ali. All right, well, that was interesting. I want to thank Frank Sinatra and the rest of the Sinatra group for being here with us. Some great artists and musicians. It was great to get some of their thoughts that had really nothing to do with our topic today. Really, I guess. Did they, Flynn? No, really nothing to do with our topic. No, not really. But it was fun to have them here, and I want to thank them for being here. We do have one more special guest here today, or special guest, if you will. We have one of the bands that was very high on both Flynn and I's list, and it's an honor to have them here with us today, and I want to introduce them to you now. We have with us here the Beatles, the legendary Beatles. We're going to get some of their thoughts and opinions on the topic for today. John, let's start with you. John, what'd you think of our list of the best rock bands of all time? I thought they were a good list there, didn't I, mates? They're both good lists. A lot of rock bands on that I enjoy. Obviously, I thought Ali's list was a little bit better than Flynn's. Ali had us at number one. Flynn had us number two. So Ali's list was better, but a lot of bands I enjoy. I love rock and roll. I live for rock and roll. It's my baby. It's what I do, and so I enjoy the bands on your list. And Ali's was better, but those are my opinions. All right, all right. Well, Paul, let's get to you. Paul, what do you think of the topic today and our list in general? Well, I don't really care for lists. Now, do I, boys? I don't really care for lists or rankings. I'm not much of a rankings guy. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. That's what I am. I'm also a vegetarian. Yeah, yeah, we all know that you're a vegetarian, Paul. Yeah, well, I'm a vegetarian. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I don't care about rankings. I don't, I just like to reach people and, touch them in their hearts. And so I don't really care about the rankings or anything like that. But it's a fun topic. I love rock and roll. But, I don't really get into rankings. I really don't, boys. All right. Well, that was a little worthless. Let's get to George. George, what did you think of the topic and the list that Ali and I made? Well, I'm a big fan of both lists, actually, boys. I'm a big rock and roll music guy. It's got a place in my heart. It's what I do. It's what I live for. Uh, but the biggest issue I had is I'm with Ali. I would have had Led Zeppelin in my top three. I really would have. I think John Bonham's the greatest drummer in the history of rock and roll. I think that's a fact. And I would have had Led Zeppelin out higher. Flynn, you didn't have it on your list, which I took some umbrage with. I really did. But overall, you had a lot of bands that I love on there. But that was my one big issue. I would have had Led Zeppelin probably in my top three. And that was, I don't know, that's what I thought, really. Those are my opinions. All right. All right. Well, pretty insightful thoughts from George on the topic. Nice change of pace. Let's get to Ringo. Ringo, are you okay down there? Are you sitting on the floor over there? Is that what's going on? Well, yeah, I'm sitting on the floor, but you didn't really have enough room on the bench for all of us, did you? Did you now? And I want my bandmates to be very comfortable. I really do. That's the most important thing to me. I want my bandmates to be happy and comfortable. As far as your list concerned, I'm a big rock and roll music guy, of course. I have grown up in it. I've lived through it. I love rock and roll music. You guys had most of my favorite bands on the list. I would add Cream on there, to be honest with you. I love Cream. But, I respect the opinions of my bandmates, and I just want them to be comfortable, and I'm happy here on the floor. So there's that. But I really don't get into rankings. A lot of people might have me as the second greatest living Beatle of all time, but I don't care about that. Some people might have Pete Best, but I don't care about rankings. But it's fun to talk about. Yeah, okay. I'd like to thank the Beatles for being here. That's great insight from all four of them. I think we're just about ready to wrap it up here. I think that's all we have. I have a question for the Beatles, actually, real quick. If you don't mind, I have a question. Oh, okay. Well, I guess we don't really have a protocol here anymore. I guess people just do whatever they want. Go ahead, Jesus. What's your question for the Beatles? Shoot away. Well, I'm just curious. At one point you guys said that you were bigger than Jesus. I think John, that was your statement. I'm just curious if you stand by that. Like, do you still believe that? Because it sounds like a pretty ridiculous statement. So I'm just curious. Do you stand by that statement, or do you regret it? No, I stand by the statement. Really, Jesus. It, as far as rock and roll goes, like they said, it's down to the Beatles or the Stones, really. I mean, those are kind of the people's top two picks. And with religions, there's so many religions, and there's a lot of different ones to choose from. So yeah, I stand by the statement. I think we're more popular than Jesus, really. Huh? Huh? Well, that's a very interesting opinion. It really is. I wonder how that will work out for you in the long run, John. I really do wonder if you'll regret that. I got no regrets, man. I'm just living my life. Huh. Okay. Well, we'll see how that plays out. We really will. Okay. Well, I think that's all we have for the podcast today. We had a lot of great guests on there. I want to thank every single one of them for being here. It was a lot of fun. We did a lot of great things. I do want to kick it over to Ron real quick here, though, and see what he has to think. Ron, what did you think of our list today? Well, I enjoyed both lists. You had a lot of great bands that I like on there. I would have had the Starland vocal band really high, personally, but that's just me. Okay, so not much from Ron today. Not much from Ron. His 2 cents was not worth $1. Ali, I think we're going to wrap it up here, don't you? Yeah, I do, Flynn. All right, well, it's been a real pleasure doing this again with you today. I'm looking forward to next week with a brand new topic and brand new list and a lot to discuss. But I had a lot of fun doing this week, and we'll look forward to next week. Yeah, we are going to look forward to next week, and I can't wait to see your coffee mug next week, Flynn. I really can't. I'm really, really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. You sure okay down there, Ringo? You sure okay? Are you sure you're okay down there, buddy? Yeah, I'm fine, mate. As long as you guys are comfortable, that's all I really care about. Really, that's all I care about. Huh, okay. So top two living Beatles, huh? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who would have thought? Who would have thought I would have made it this far? But I did. That's kind of life. That's kind of life.